Hey, welcome to the Olympic Coaching Podcast today. I'm excited to finish up my interview with Christian Larson here today as we're talking more about biomechanics. Okay, this is the positions that your body get in for the maximum amount of leverage and performance and safety and injury prevention. And so we get into detail about why that's important and how you can improve your positions even now. And so we're real excited to talk about that today, but also wanted to bring up hey, I think a lot of people look at Olympic coaching. They may not know everything that I do as a coach, everything that we do as a part of Olympic coaching. Like we handle nutrition coaching as a major specialty, but also we're deep into strength conditioning and CrossFit coaching, that functional fitness and sport specific training. So we really are working hard, and I really value as highest priority in my own expertise of being a nutrition coach and a strength conditioning specialist, of prioritizing movement, improving movement patterns, ultimately improving your performance and your ability to function maximally for whatever you want to perform in, whatever kind of challenge or physical activity you want to do. So if you want more of that coaching, you want to sign up for one of the programs we have, reach out to me at caleb.linfit on Instagram or visit our website at linfitcoaching.com. But I'm excited to jump into an interview with Christian Larson today, talking about biomechanics. Here we go. Okay, so biomechanics. This is something you teach.
Yeah.
So you know a little bit about this, at least a little bit, right? So I want to get into something that I preach like crazy, and it's something that the FMS, functional movement systems, they it's part of their mantra. Like move well first, then move often.
Right.
And so I just want to dive into this topic and see why do our positions matter whenever we're exercising, we're moving, we're even just like our regular daily movements, sitting, standing, walking, whatever it is.
As I'm slouched over a little bit, we talk about
yeah, like suddenly we just sat up straighter, like oh whoops. Great, maybe we'll break out the standing desk and I'll stand.
That's right. I have one in my office. I need to bring it home because I'm working from home so much right now. But yeah, I love the standing desk. I'm always
legit.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's define it real quick. What are biomechanics?
Yeah. So biomechanics is people think of it as technique. That's what biomechanics is. And if you want to get into the physics side of biomechanics, you look at kinematics and kinetics. Kinematics is the study of motion. So you look at velocity, acceleration, momentum, kinetic energy, stuff like that. And then kinetics is the forces that cause those motions. So within our systems, we have muscle that produces force. We can also bias some other soft tissue if we use plyometrics, right? If we do quick stretches, we can make our soft tissues help enhance force production. So we have that side of biomechanics. The side that I talk about way more, though, is what you just mentioned, is positions, right? Mm-hmm. Joint mechanics. How are we built? What are the joints? What are movements at joints? What are common injuries at joints? And if you really break down biomechanics, there's two goals of biomechanics. The first goal is to improve performance. So if you're studying biomechanics, the first goal is to improve performance. The second goal is injury prevention. Now, the really cool part about this is if you improve performance, you're likely doing it through better position and better technique, which allows better force production through your system and lower force bleeds. That's something that I saw in the stuff that you talked about. We'll definitely can get to that. But by doing that, you're automatically reducing your chances of injury. So that's what's really cool about looking at biomechanics and positional strength and sequencing a movement. If you get better at those things, not only are you going to get better at performance at doing it, you're going to decrease your chances of getting hurt. So.
Oh man, this just opened a huge can of questions and everything. Man, this is awesome. This is something I'm most passionate about. So, I'm going to be careful to keep us on a limit the time here so we don't just flood people with information overload, just dump it on them, be like, oh no, what do I even do? So so how does even a basic understanding of biomechanics, just understanding movement and positions, how can that change the way that a coach or an athlete views or even values movement?
Great question. I love what FMS does. I actually went to FMS level 1 and level 2 to see how they did things because position is so important with all of life, just like you said. let's just talk basics. The way that we sit in America anyway, most people are sitting for many hours a day. We sit at about mid-range hip flexion. By sitting in that position all the time, a lot of times we have our toes pointed slightly out, so we're a little bit externally rotated at our hips, and they're flexed. So our hip flexors get tight, so the muscles that cross the pelvis and the hip and attach on the femur get shorter, and that causes our pelvic girdle to tilt forward anteriorly. And when that happens, we get excess extension in our lumbar spine, and we get a sore back, right? And you see this all the time. People are standing in line. Just watch them standing in line. Their chest is a little bit forward and their butt sticking out a little bit. Mm-hmm. That's because they have anterior pelvic tilt, likely because of how they're sitting most of the day.
It's just because of how their tissues in their hips have adapted from sitting so much.
Yeah, that's it. And it's like, well, how do we avoid that? Well, we have to be intentional then on making sure we open up our hips. We do a lot of hip mobility work, especially on the anterior side. But then also you see people with low back problems because we sit in this external rotation position, and we have external rotators at our hip, and those get short. So those end up pulling, and you'll see this all the time if you go to the gym. Just check this out next time you go to the gym. If people are walking around with their toes pointed slightly out, they're getting tight external hip rotators, and eventually that's going to cause some back problems, right? So it was super interesting stuff, and it's just from us what we do on a regular basis. And these things have happened to me personally. So I'm the same as you. I was like, why is this happening? How do I get this fixed? I know you've had Mitch Keating on here. He's awesome with movement. I go to Mitch. But that just understanding biomechanics will have a huge effect on probably a coach's eye and how they coach people and what they put emphasis on. That's what it's done for me anyway.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's fascinating. I love how like this episode is like so visual. I imagine people were just listening to that, what you were saying just now, and they're like thinking about how they're sitting and where their toes are pointed, and you're like, oh no, like I gotta fix my posture, you know? Right. So, but that's what's amazing about it. It's like raising your awareness, even just slightly, like even just thinking about it a few times throughout the day can make a huge impact. Like,
right.
And I love what small things like Kelly Starrett is doing with the Ready State, like giving you some practical mobilizations to help open up the hips or lengthen those tissues, or even just like getting into a ready position, like squeeze your butt as many times as you think about it throughout the day. It's going to change your pelvic position so that
because it pulls you into a better position.
Yeah. So it's just hilarious. Like there's actually been literal case studies done of like, if someone squeezes their butt a certain number of times a day, like do they have less back pain? It's true.
Yeah. I bet you it's correlated, right?
Yeah, it's correlated. Yeah. It's hilarious. But okay, so as far as biomechanics and lifting and exercise. So I've always told people that your lift begins, whatever exercise movement you're doing, it begins before you move. It starts with your setup. Is that true?
Absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. And I think I learned this the best when I learned how CrossFit taught a deadlift, because I had deadlifted my whole life, but I always had a different setup. I didn't have a way to get myself in the proper position. Right. And that's where it really started hitting me on how important setup was to the entire movement. Right. So in a way that I like to explain this when I'm in class is just boiling it down to what are we actually after, right? So pretty much any movement that we do, we're going to start with our feet on the ground, right? So, and we generate force through our muscles, but if we always have to pull Newton's laws into biomechanics, right? We got to talk about Newton.
Force.
So you have the law of reaction, right? Yeah. The law of reaction. So ground reaction force, really our ability to be efficient in our movement is not only how much force can we put down into the ground, right? Because as we push down, then we can move that force back up, or it's going to push back up on us with as much force as we push down. So we generate force to push down, and then we take that force back up through our system. Now, if we're in a better position, not only are we less likely to be injured, but force transfers through our system more efficiently. So we can place it, if we're deadlifting, we can place that force onto the bar like we want to. Whereas if we have a bad knee position or our lumbar spine's out of place a little bit, then our body has to use extra energy to hold that so we don't injure that joint. and we can't use that energy to move the bar.
Mm.
Right. So really all of technique work or biomechanics is meant to create more efficient force production through our systems. And if we think of it that way, then we're like, okay, well, I don't want to lose force there because I only have a certain amount that I can generate, and I want it all to go where I want it to go. And that's where I really start with it. And then I say, okay, so now because of that, how important is our setup? How important is our sequencing of movement? Right? What if we're out of sequence on our movement? We're wasting a ton of force. We're wasting a ton of energy that we're not putting where we want it to go. So I think it all has to boil back down to, okay, our goal is this. If we want to be as efficient as possible in that, then we have to be good at mechanics.
But okay, so this is super fascinating. I mean, you mentioned how like the setup is super, super important because like if you don't set up right, the rest of your lift or the rest of your exercise isn't going to go well because your force isn't be able to be applied efficiently.
Correct.
And I'd add to that, like if you're not being efficient with your force production, you're going to get fatigued faster. So ultimately your performance dips. Yeah. So if you're choosing to compromise your position because you want to like beat someone next to you, ultimately you're going to end up losing in the long run because you could totally beat someone else,
right.
down the road, and you're not going to be as tired or busted up or needing someone to massage your back afterwards or something like that. So
no, I love the way you pulled physiology into this, right? You're going to waste ATP.
Yeah. And so that brings it to like the position matters throughout your lift as well. So my question for you is like, how does a willingness to compromise your position, like in a lift or whether your position is compromised from like a lack of mobility or a lack of skill, or is just like, you just don't care.
Right.
How does it affect you in the short term and the long term?
Sure. So in the short term, so every situation's different. So most people are not in the middle of a high level competition on a daily basis, right? Yeah. So sometimes the goal is to win. You're competing in this thing and your form's going a little bit, but you need a couple more reps. So you just finish them out how you can. I totally get it. That's part of competition. That's why, sport should have more inherent risk to it than a training session. Because you can control all the variables in a training session. You can't always in a sport.
Yeah.
But acutely in one session, if you choose to compromise, you could injure yourself. I mean, that's the worst case scenario, right? You injure yourself and then you can't train. And that we all know how frustrating that is, right? That's the worst. Like, I can't do what I want to do. Yeah. And that leads to psychological issues as well. And I loved, if I jump back, I want to give you a compliment on the finisher. That's a great psychological tool because then people do feel like, okay, I'm sweating, I got some work in, even if that wasn't the goal of the training session. So I just had to give you props on that. I'm going to use it, Caleb. But yeah, acutely, you could injure yourself. Over the long term, though, over the long run, you're really just going to cost yourself in performance. The better technique you have, the better you're going to be able to perform long term. And as you continuously improve that technique, you're going to be able to add workload to it. You're going to be able to add speed to it. So your overall performance is going to get better if you give yourself time. We're all in a hurry, right? So that's where, when I talk with people, I'm really like, okay, unless you have a specific goal for a competition, treat health, wellness, performance, whatever as a lifetime thing. And you've got time to keep getting better and keep getting better and keep getting better. And the less you compromise up front, the longer you're going to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, that just shows that no matter what we're doing for exercise, whether you're running for a long time or you're doing a 1 rep max, like your position, your technique matters because ultimately, like if you're compromising on your position, that's also just putting wear and tear on your joints that's not necessary. It's putting your body in bad positions, so it's going to cause stress, whether that's on soft or hard tissues, and you're going to get aches and pains that are going to become chronic pains if you don't deal with that, Right. And so it's like if you feel something that's off, or if you feel something that hurts, it's not a sign that you should just grit through it. Like, oh, I just got to get the work done. I want the gains. It's that's your body telling you like something's not right. Let's fix it.
Yeah, that's what K-Star has a great quote on that. Kelly Starrett has a great quote on that. He's like, movement is not supposed to cause pain. If
Yeah.
there's pain or discomfort, that means something's off and you need to address that so it doesn't get worse. Not just, like, and I think we all heard that growing up. Come on, just fight through the pain. No pain, no gain. Well, it depends what kind of pain you're talking about. Because if we're talking about soft tissue or joint pain, there will be no gain because you're not going to be able to.
Yeah. You're ultimately going to be sidelined at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's humbling to hear. It's like, it's hard for people to accept. But I think
And
something
me
that
too. I mean, yeah. I don't want anybody to think that, no, I have all this stuff. I've not only read about this stuff and seen it, but I've done it, right? I've been, I'm just going to do one more because I'll be okay. And then I hurt myself and I'm out. I've done that so many times. So
I mean, it's true. Part of the reason that us as coaches or people who are saying these things out loud, a lot of it's from personal experience. We had this conviction because it's like, I've broken myself so many times. I don't want you to do it. So right. I don't want you to be as broken as I've been several times.
Just learn from me. Just learn from me so you don't have to do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned a little bit about how like your force and efficiencies really, like it really drops whenever you're compromising movement or your movement isn't ideal.
Mm-hmm.
And your injury risk goes up. Can you like elaborate on that a little bit? Like, why does that happen? So like, biomechanically, like what's happening so far as like forces whenever you're compromising movement?
Yeah. So if you just say you're going to generate X amount of force as you push off the ground, and that stays the same no matter what. If you are in a bad position, then your body is going to have to use some of that force and hold a position that you wouldn't have to, right? So let's say you're broken, your lumbar spine's excessively flexed, right? Mm-hmm. Which isn't a strong position. It's a non-neutral position of your spine. Mm-hmm. So in order to, your body's going to protect against injuring that. So it's going to throw more muscle tension into that area to try to brace that area. That's going to take force to do that. So some of the force that could have been on the bar, moving the bar, is now having to be used here.
Okay.
Right. That's or if we're out of sequence, a lot of times if we're out of sequence of the movement, it's not necessarily that we have the same amount of force, but I do this really weird jump in my biomechanics class. So I get up at the front of the class and I ask everybody if they have been watching jumping technique. And of course, everybody says no, right? No, I have not been watching anybody's jumping technique. I said, okay, so I'm going to show you that you can still see poor technique, or I want you to tell me if I have good technique. And so I stand up and I get into a ready position. And instead of extending through my hips and knees, I extend my ankles first, and then I jump.
Oh, I bet they're like, whoa.
Oh yeah, they laugh. That's exactly what they do. And so what I'm trying to show them is if I'm out of sequence, my jump performance drops drastically. Now I show them an extreme situation, but they can't tell me though why. So they'll laugh and I go, okay, I'll take that as you thought that wasn't good. So then I say, okay, but why wasn't it good? What did I do? Well, you jumped backwards. Yeah, I did jump backwards, but why did I jump backwards? Well, your shoulders went back. Yeah, they did, but why did they do that? Right. So I'm trying to get them to understand the sequence of my ankles extending too soon caused my whole jump to be off. Mm-hmm. And so my efficiency of force production to get myself vertical in the air was terrible because my mechanics were bad. Mm-hmm. So that's how I try to, and that's really been the best tool that I can use and then people get it. Oh, okay. My technique has to be good so I can efficiently transmit force through my system and get the outcome I want.
Man, that's awesome. I think it's good for athletes and coaches to hear today just about why biomechanics or positions really matter for our performance and for our injury risk and everything. So, man, thanks for your time today, Christian. This was great to just talk back and forth on this. And I learned a lot from you every time we talk. It's just good to be reminded of a lot of these things.
Sure thing. I learned a lot today too, Caleb. I appreciate you having me on. And like we were talking about, we could do this forever. So it's a good cutoff time, but I really appreciate you giving me the time, and hopefully this can be helpful to people that you're working with.
All right. Thanks, man.
Yeah.